We are delighted to have Republican Congressman Jay Obernolte of Southern California's Inland Empire, who will be our special guest here in a second. I'm just going to give him a little introduction because he's done such a darn fine job as a member of Congress. He's worked overtime to pass legislation helping California's hardworking families by lowering taxes, stopping government encroachment into privacy and personal liberties, and upholding law and order. Jay is a strong advocate for veterans. He lives in Big Bear with his wife, Heather. They have 2 sons. In addition to owning a video game development company, Jay is a certified flight instructor. And you'll appreciate this, Don. Jay is a teacher of martial arts. And so
I know this.
Yeah, you're an athletic guy, so you'll like that. He has a BS in engineering and applied science. He also has a doctorate in public administration. Come on in, Congressman Obernolte. We're delighted to have you with us today.
Hey, Jim and Don, how are you? It's great to be here.
We're doing great. We got so many things going on in Sacramento and in Washington, and we've got all these international issues. We've got people hurting here in California. I'm sure that you're hearing from your constituents in San Bernardino County about all of these difficulties that people are having, largely, I think, as a result of some of the policy faux pas of the Biden administration and the problems in California. Tell us what you're focusing on, what you're interested in, and what your priorities are.
Well, you said it exactly right. The number one thing on my constituents' minds right now is the devastating impact that inflation is having on their ability to provide for their families. And unfortunately, the inflation that we're experiencing, which is the worst inflation in 40 years now, is a direct result of the disastrous economic policies that government has followed over the last couple of years. And the tragedy is that we were warned about this. You know, when a year and a half ago, when the powers that be in Washington, D.C. and in Sacramento, when they proposed to dump an extra $4 trillion into the economy, economists warned us that that was dangerously inflationary because you create a situation where you've got lots of new dollars chasing a fixed amount of goods and services. And macroeconomics says that prices have to go up when you do that. And so unfortunately, what we're seeing is the fruition of exactly what we were warned about. And unfortunately, it's going to get worse before it gets better. You know, the Department of Labor had that report just a month ago that said inflation is at 7.5%. But also buried in that report further down, it talks about the producer price index, which is not the prices that consumers pay for goods. It's the prices that manufacturers pay for raw materials to make their goods. And the PPI for those producers was at 10%, so higher than the consumer price index. So if those manufacturers are paying a higher amount for their raw materials now, they're going to have to bake those prices into the prices they charged for the finished goods whenever they come out of the factory. So unfortunately, I think it's going to get worse before it gets better.
That is a sad report, but it's good to know that, you're focused on this stuff and that you're clear-eyed about it. Don, you had a couple questions you wanted to come in with.
Well, one thing, we've talked about it before on the show, and I wanted to get your perspective on it because you're up close to the situation. But I know that you voted against forming the January 6th committee. And what I want to know is Nancy Pelosi's role in the security situation regarding that day. She seems to be behind the curve with everybody, but nobody is calling her out. The media certainly hasn't. I want you to take a free swing at that issue.
I have the same questions that you have. I'd like to know, first of all, why were we not more prepared? We were warned by multiple different intelligence agencies of the potential for a large number of people protesting in front of the Capitol on January 6th. Why were we not more prepared for that? And I also want to know why the National Guard was not called in sooner. I want to know because the Capitol Police and the Sergeant at Arms have submitted conflicting testimony on this. So I want to know, was the National Guard called in? And if not, who made the decision to not call them in? Was that the Speaker's office? Was it the Sergeant at Arms? Was it the Capitol Police? So, I mean, I think that those are extremely important questions, and you're absolutely right. They're not being asked right now.
Do you see any purpose of this commission or committee other than Democratic propaganda?
Well, I mean, I think that's what it is, unfortunately, and that's why I voted against the formation of the committee, which, was not actually an easy vote for me, because I think we all would like to get to the bottom of what happened on January 6th. But I became convinced, as did many of my colleagues, that rather than an honest inquiry, this was going to turn into just an excuse to exercise partisanism. And the reason that I reached that conclusion is I actually listened to the debate, and I listened to what some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle had to say about what they were hoping to accomplish. So that's why I voted no. And then immediately we were proven correct when Nancy Pelosi refused to seat the Republican nominees for that committee. And I think it can't be underscored what an unfortunate historic precedent this has set, because normally the two sides of the aisle debate over how many committee slots each side is going to get. But what has kind of been inviolate until now is the fact that each party gets to choose its own nominees on committees. And unfortunately, that was completely violated in the case of the January 6th committee, and I hope that hasn't set a really damaging precedent for the future.
I wanted to ask Congressman. Oh, go ahead, Don.
Oh, go ahead.
I'll just jump in. This is Jim Lacy.
Jump in, Jim.
Yeah, and we'll remind listeners, this is Jim Lacy with Don Romano. We're live in Taxifornia, and we're interviewing Congressman Jay Obernolte. Congressman, I wanted to ask about spending. Is this Build Back Better plan, or is there going to be even more spending that's going to be coming out of Washington, D.C.? Things seem to be stalled a little bit because of some of the Senate opposition coming from Democrats, actually, Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. Can we expect there's going to be more spending, and what does that have to say for inflation?
Well, thank goodness we were able to stop the Build Back Better plan, or as we call it, the Build Back Broke plan, because that's what it would have done. I think what's particularly disingenuous about what the Democrats were trying to do with that is if you look at the scoring from the Congressional Budget Office, and the Democrats are scoring the spending on that bill as if everything sunsets on time. So they'll start a new program, and first of all, they phase in the start of the program. So rather than starting immediately, they start it in 12 months or 24 months to bring the cost of it down, because it's only forecast over a 10-year window. But then what they do is they sunset it after a year or two. And we all know that's not the way things work in Washington, D.C. Nothing is harder to kill than a new government program. So we asked the CBO to score the Build Back Broke plan as if none of the programs sunset that were created. And they came up with a scoring of over $5 trillion of new spending. So it's just a stunning amount of new government spending. I really applaud Joe Manchin for focusing on what matters, which is the deficit in our national debt. He's very concerned about that, and he's absolutely right. And so I'm really glad that he sees the necessity there, and I hope that he continues to voice his opposition to doing anything that would increase the deficit.
A couple of weeks ago, we had Assemblyman Thurston Smitty Smith from your area on the show. And he kind of opened our eyes a little bit to this marijuana problem. And I noticed in doing the research that you've been having some focus on this, too. And it's not about banning marijuana or saying you can't smoke it, but it's about the problem of criminal, illegal marijuana. And Don looked into this as well. I don't know if Don wants to jump in on this, but could you give us a little briefing to our listeners about this whole story, because it's something you don't really hear about much in the media? Sure.
Yeah, it's a terrible problem in the Mojave Desert and the high desert areas that I represent. The situation is that when Prop 64 was passed a few years ago, that's the proposition that legalized recreational use of marijuana in California. Part of that proposition, buried in the fine print, also decriminalized the cultivation of marijuana and changed all illegal cultivation at any scale from a felony to a misdemeanor. So, and we're not talking about a couple plants in the backyard. That means you can have a large-scale commercial grow illegally on hundreds of acres, and it's still just a misdemeanor. And so what that has catalyzed is these huge grows that are being run by foreign drug cartels right here in the middle of the high desert. And it's stunning if you see the scale. I've been up with the San Bernardino County Sheriff in some of their aerial patrol vehicles looking at these illegal grows. And what these growers do is they bulldoze hundreds of acres of pristine desert. They build a big earthen berm around it, and that berm is there not to keep us out, but to keep in the people that they smuggle across the border, that they work in virtual slavery there. And so this is actually directly tied to our complete failure to secure our southern border, because right now the border is controlled not by the Border Patrol, but by the Mexican drug cartels. And the drug cartels charge about $8,000 to get across the border. And if you don't pay that, they will kill you. So people either pay up or they promise to pay. And if they promise to pay because they can't pay now, then what will happen is the drug cartels will use them in human trafficking in one of these illegal grow operations. These things are using banned pesticides that aren't legal anywhere in the United States because they're so toxic and they wind up in the groundwater. They're stealing millions and millions of gallons of water every single day to irrigate the grows. I mean, it's incredibly destructive. So that's an effort that both Smitty and I have been leading to try and get these things eradicated because it's incredibly brazen. It's incredibly destructive.
All right, we're getting towards the end of the segment, unfortunately, and we could go on and on. You've got such great information, but let me ask you just a quick political question. How does your conference feel about the upcoming elections? You know, with Biden in a new poll out today that he's so unpopular nationwide. I mean, everyone is just kind of saying that the Republicans are going to just sweep the midterm elections. But how does your conference feel about it? And and if that happens, that'll be the first time you've actually been in the majority, right?
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah.
Well, it's funny, we don't want to be overly optimistic. Right now we feel very good about the midterms. In fact, I was having lunch a couple of days ago with Kevin McCarthy, and he said, Jay, I wish the election were tomorrow because the winds of change are at our backs here. But I also think you've got to keep in mind that we can't be overconfident. We don't know what's going to happen geopolitically between now and November. There are a couple of things that could happen that might really energize the Democratic voting base and shift the political equation. So we just need to work as hard as we can at getting good candidates to file for all of the available seats and supporting those candidates through fundraising and grassroots organizing to make sure we're in a position to take back the House in November, because that's what we need. We need to take back the House. We need to take back the Senate. We need to do it by a large enough majority that we're not having to go to the Democrats every time we need votes to get something passed. And if we can do that, I mean, we're still going to have to deal with a Democratic president for the next 2 years, but at least we can stop the worst of this bad stuff from occurring, which is what we desperately need to do.
Don has a quick question before we close the segment.
Yes, a question where you're on the sidelines, basically, as we are, but you're closer to the action, and that is with the Supreme Court nominee, Brown Jackson. What are your thoughts on her nomination?
Well, I think she's going to be confirmed, and I mean it's really political theater, isn't it? I mean this was a foregone conclusion from the moment she was nominated that she was going to be confirmed. I actually think, having watched some of the hearings, it's amazing the double standard that's being employed because I think some of the Republicans, you can argue about how much decorum is being used, but you can't argue that these hearings are the setting for really asking tough questions of any nominee from any party with any background, should expect to get asked hard questions in these hearings. And it's the job of the Senate to ask those hard questions. And if you look at the treatment, that she is getting compared to the treatment that Brett Kavanaugh got during his hearings, no one can argue that she's being offered less decorum than he was, right? Yeah. So, I think it's unfortunate. It was really an indication of kind of how far we've sunk in terms of partisanism that this kind of thing is going on.
Yeah, I don't want to belabor the point, but she said that part of the reason that she was doing this was because, she wanted her, daughters to see that she could accomplish this. But, of course, she can't identify who a woman is, but she knows who her daughters are. I mean, I don't know. We won't go too low on that. Congressman, how can listeners get in touch with you if they'd like to follow up or be of help?
Well, you can certainly follow me on social media. We have accounts on any social media platform that you use. We've got accounts. You can Google me, J. Obernolte. Spell it however way you want. Google will help you with that. And also, you can subscribe to my newsletter if you would like. Go to our website, which is you can find out. Just Google J. Obernolte, and it'll take you to our house website and sign up for our newsletter. We try and bring really interesting things that are going to keep people informed about what's going on in D.C. up every week when we send out that newsletter, and I think that you'll really enjoy it. So certainly do that, and thank you very much to all your listeners for being engaged on this issue. I mean, I really think if you look at the hardship that is facing California families right now in terms of what they're paying for fuel, what they're paying for energy, what they're paying for inflation, and the fact that all of this has been directly caused by government action, you can see why it's so important to be involved right now.